G'day, I'm Mark Hoth and welcome to Swift Almanac. Welcome to iOS Essentials, Auto Layout, Size, Classes and Vary for Traits. This topic was requested by our subscriber Student of Life. It's a vitally important topic, so I'm covering it out of production order, and if you have any requests for further topics, please drop a comment below. Auto layout is becoming increasingly more complex as more and more sizes of iPhones and iPads are released. So it's really important that you know what can be done and how to do it to make your life easier. This tutorial we'll be using storyboards, and I'll be making another tutorial in the future about actually coding constraints and anchors. Let's learn about auto layout. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to go into XCode and create a new project, just a single view app, and we'll call it Auto Layout. We'll save it on our desktop, and we'll go to the main storyboard. Now, if you haven't seen the storyboard before, there's a list of different view controllers and also the UI buttons that are available down here, and you can filter these by typing in some text. So you can put button, for instance, and it'll show you all the various types of buttons that are available, and you can also type in your UI view, and we'll be using that later. Down here there are different ways that you can view the size of the canvas that you've got. So you can start with the old iPhone 4S and you can build up to the SE or 6, the 8, the X, the 8 Plus, and various iPads. And then you can also change whether the orientation is landscape or portrait. As you add controllers, this panel here will include, well, we'll just add a view. We'll start to add items to it, and we'll be able to manipulate those over there. And over this side on our inspectors, we've also got inspectors for the identity inspector, for changing the class of buttons, etc. And we've got our attributes inspector that we can make changes to. And because we won't be moving out of the main storyboard, we can get rid of that panel and give us some more space. So if we go to this size inspector, and we've got this view that we've placed up here. In fact, what we'll do is we'll go and rather than giving it a white background, we'll just give it a red background so we can see where it is. And then if we go to the size inspector, we'll see that this view has 4 different coordinates. It has an XY coordinate, which is this the position of the top left corner, and it has a width and it has a height. We'll make the height 120 just for the sake of it. And that is well, in terms of the coordinate space, you should know that the 0, 0 point is this top left-hand corner, and the x-axis goes across here in a positive fashion. And unlike what you would have been taught in primary school, the y coordinates go positive going down the page. I don't know why they didn't select the bottom left and did everything the way we were taught at primary school, but in any event, it's 0 to x and 0 to y for the coordinate space. So when it says 40 and 71, it's 40 across and 71 pixels down. And if we change it to, say, 30 across, it should pull it further to the left. And if we make it, say, 50, then it should make it further to the top. And that's the case. Now, because there are all of these different sizes, if we were to say put this in the top right hand corner and just place it there so it looks like it's filling up the entire available space, if we were to move to a different device, say an iPad, which I can do just by clicking on the device here, then as you can see, our rectangle is still the same height and width, and it's still in the 0, 0 coordinates, but it's not covering up the entire space like we'd want it to. And so what Apple has done, it's come up with some terms, anchors and constraints, and that allows us to essentially define the size of this item or any view dependent upon what the available borders are. So we can, for instance, center it in the Y space, or we can center it in the X space. We can snap it to either side, or we can make it a full screen. And once these anchors or constraints have been selected, then the operating system takes care of resizing things based on the device that we have. So the important thing to know is that you require 4 constraints that don't conflict in order to correctly specify where a view is going to be located on every different device and in every different orientation. And if you think about it, pretty much all views are rectangles or squares. They've got 4 sides, and there's an X, a Y, a width and a height, and essentially we're going to create a constraint for all 4 of those items, and that's why you need at least 4 constraints in order to determine the size of the view in every different orientation and device. So in terms of how we create these anchors or constraints, an anchor is basically saying that some feature of the view is going to be fixed or anchored to something else, and a constraint means that the view is constrained in some way. So for instance, we might constrain this view, and we go down here to add new constraints. We could constrain it so the width is always 240 and the height is always 120. And if we add those 2 constraints, then no matter what size we choose, this shape is not going to be any smaller or larger regardless of where or which device we're selecting. So down here we can add constraints just by clicking on this Add New Constraints option. And now that we've added these height and width, and this is always going to be the same size, then we need to position it somewhere. And in general, people want to position things centrally, or they want to justify them to the right or the left. So the storyboard provides a nice little way of finding the center with this little blue line, and also in the X coordinates as well. And then if we hold down the control key and click and drag, we can go center vertically in the safe area, and we can click and drag to the right, and that will give us center horizontally in the safe area. Now under XCode 9, there's been the development of the safe area. And the safe area is basically the area that is always going to be visible and usable by you, the developer. So it excludes the portion at the top where it's got like battery and all those little tiny icons. I think it's 22 pixels at the top. So if we provide everything in the safe area, it's slightly smaller than the total view for the window. And by clicking on this checkbox, we can say we want to use the safe area relative margins, and if you uncheck it, then you can use the entire space. So there's some terminology that you should be aware of. This space here is the top, and this space here is the bottom, and that's pretty much what everyone would expect. But the space on the left-hand side is called the lead, or what's leading before this edge occurs, and on this side it's called the trailing. So we can set anchor points that are a certain distance from the left-hand side or leading, and you can set that as a fixed interval. So you might set the leading, if we create another view, and again hold down Control and drag, leading space to the safe area, we can select that, and then if we click on that, we can change that to a constant value of, let's say, 50. And if we give our space a background color of, say, blue, then we'll be able to see it. So again, we'll set that to width and height of 120, and we'll actually add a constraint to the top here, and we'll set that to be 16. Now we've got 4 constraints, and it's automatically repositioned itself. So no matter what size we use, this red one is always going to be in the middle because that's the anchoring position that we've created it, and this one here is the blue one is always going to be in the top left-hand corner because we've set the top and the leading constraints, and the size is also constant. Bearing in mind that all the UI controls are subclasses of views, and so this doesn't need to be a view per se. It could be you want 3 controls in the same space and you want to have a background or whatever it might be, or you might want to group them together. And if I select that one and give it a background color, and this one, I'm going to add some constraints. This time I'm going to make it 80 by 80, so it's going to be a square. And I want to put it in the bottom right-hand corner of this red space. So I'll put it at an 8 by 8, add those 4 constraints, and it updates. So this blue view is now constrained to the inner side of this red square. Now the red square is not going to change in size because it's fixed, and neither is the blue square. In essence, I could have, if I'd have so wanted, given it a right and or a trailing and a bottom constraint that sends it to the edges of the available space. I'm just going to move that back to something small. So I could have trailed this to the edge of the safe area and bottomed it to the edge of the bottom of the screen. But then if I'd have changed this red location, if I'd have decided to move the red location, then I'd also have to change the blue one. Because the blue one is relative to the red one, if I change the red one, the blue one will simply follow. Now, if you've seen my beginners tutorial, see how I work out how an interface is going to work, and that is I set one item and then I make all other items relative to that one item. So once the one item is centered and located in the right place, then every other item just becomes relative to that. So if we were to create another view and put it down here, and if I was to give that a color of, I'm not sure, light grey will do, then again I can hold down the control and drag to this item, and then I can say that the vertical spacing between those two items, and I can set that to be, say, 16. And again, I need to set the constraints for the height and width to 240 and 120, so they're the same size. And the other thing I need to do, I've set how high it is and I've set the height and the width, but I haven't, even though it looks centered at the moment, it hasn't been centered. So I need to center that. And again, I can control, I want to center it on the x-axis. So center horizontally in the safe area is what I want to choose. And now that is going to be centered no matter which space I use or which orientation. So 4 constants, essentially 2 for size and 2 for location as a general rule. Although you might want to have a view, for instance, that takes up the entire space. And so you could, if we got another view, this view here, which I'll leave as white, you can constrain to being, say, 8 on all sides, and so that is going to stretch out the view to all of the available real estate in the view. Although I selected constrain to spacing to the nearest neighbour, so it's put itself underneath this grey one. I'm going to get rid of that one. Okay, now here on the left, you'll see that, for instance, our blue view, which is a subview of the red view, it's placed it inside itself. So we can rename these just by double clicking. Oh God. And you could actually rename them what they are. That is the red view, and this one here is the blue view. And then these 2 views here, light view, grey view. Now, as you can see, the red view has got this height and width, so that's specific to the actual view that we've put there. And then there are these other constraints down the bottom, and those are the constraints that are relative to the underlying view real estate that you want to be using. And as you click on these, on the right hand side, it comes up with a formula to say, you know, the first item, which is the red view center X, is equal to the safe area center X. And for instance, this one here on the light blue, now we've got some constraints, light blue leading here. It says that light blue leading is equal to the safe area leading plus 50. So this leading space is equal to this leading space, and we're going to add 50 points to it. So a constant of 50 is what we're going to add. And then this one, the top one, is going to say right blue view dot top equals the safe area dot top. And it's got a constant of 16. So if we change that to 0, then the frame will just update and it'll move around. Now, if you read the human interface guidelines, then numbers like 8 and 16 are bandied around as good distances between views to make things readable and the like. So if we select one of the views, then the constraints are listed down here, and as you can see, it says this is for all size classes. There's basically 2 different types of size class. There is the C, which is the compact, and there is the R, which is the regular. And if we click on an iPad, that's regular in width and regular in height, and it is also the same as that in orientation. And then as we select different iPhones, then you have an iPhone 8 Plus, which is regular in width, in landscape mode, and in height it's compact. But if we move it to portrait, then it's compact in width and it's regular. And if we get down to a phone in in landscape mode, then it's going to be compact and compact. So here we've made one of the classic blunders. I'm not sure if anyone else is a fan of The Princess Bride, but in any event, here we've developed an interface on a large screen, and when we've moved to a small screen, turned the orientation around, it is off the screen and is not visible. So it's always worthwhile starting with the smallest available real estate and making sure everything fits in that space, and then moving up and repositioning things so that they're all still centered and the like. So that's one of the classic blunders that you need to worry about. And the second problem which eventuated when the iPad came out was that there was so much available space that you ended up with these tiny controls, etc. And so Apple has come up with size classes, and the size classes are basically regular, which is iPad size, or compact, which is mini iPhone size. And there is a 2x2 grid which basically says something can be of regular width and height, or it could be of regular height, so it's tall but it's of compact width. And if then you move to the other orientation, or the landscape orientation, it could be something of width that is regular but a height which is compact. And then finally, if you go down to a very small iPhone, then you will get a width that is compact and a height that is compact. And what this Vary for Traits button allows you to do is to essentially set up to 4 interfaces, because you've got two different, well, you've basically got a 2x2 grid, so you've got 4 different options. You've got regular, regular, regular compact, compact regular, and compact compact. So you've got 4 different cases that you need to cater for. And if you do cater for all of those through this trait variation, then you can essentially have 4 different four different sets of buttons that will cover all of the different interfaces that you might need. Okay, so what traits allow us to do is to manipulate items, either their constraints and anchors, or the actual, whether the item is displayed or not, based on these width and heights. So for instance, here we've got a compact compact are the traits. So we can vary for those traits, and we'll vary by both the height and the width. So it's only affecting these 4 iPhone models in landscape mode, and we could just change the constraints. We can just update all the constraints, and and we can even add a text field just here. I'll quickly constrain that. Center horizontally, center vertically, and let's make it width 120, height. So that's all good. Move those a little bit higher. Update all of those. And then I just click Done Varying. And now that's going to save these views only for the compact display. So there's more constraints that have been added. And if we go back to our view as before, the text items aren't there because we're not in a CC, we're in a CR, or compact regular view. Even if we go here, it's in the old format, there's no text item to be displayed. But if we go back to one of the smaller outliers, our text item is there. Move Now we didn't really do the constraints right for these items, so the portrait ones, the landscape ones, are all a little bit dodgy because I didn't do them correctly. But the point is, as long as it says CC, then this text box is going to be displayed, and it's going to use this alternate framework of displaying the existing items. So that gives you a way to resize and reformat the display based on the various different sizes of the iPad and the orientation of the iPad and iPhone. Well, that's it for AutoLayout, size classes, and vary for trades. If you have any questions about this tutorial, then please leave a comment below or hit me up on Twitter @SwiftAlmanac. Please subscribe to the channel, it's free, and check out our website at www.swiftalmanac.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.